Okay. Good evening to you all. Thank you so much for making time this evening to be part of our session on conflict management in the workplace. Just quickly go ahead and share my screen. Okay, I believe my screen is audible now.
Yes, I could see it.
Okay, thank you, Na. This is going to be a very interactive session. So in as much as possible, I would like us to feel free to unmute and participate in what we are going to do. I remember some few years ago, between my boss and I, this was the conversation that happened. Boss, I don't see why we should buy laptops for the users. There is a need for us to buy laptops. That was my boss. But why laptops? These people have been using desktops, and buying them laptops, I don't think is a good idea. Now, this was something that happened, and I'll have to let you know what happened at the end. But before I get into the details, I'll go straight into my presentation and continue that story later on. Conflict management in the workplace. When you look at this picture, what comes to your mind? I just want you to tell me something. You can put it in the chat, or you can go ahead, raise your hand, unmute yourself, and talk to me. What comes to mind when you see this picture? Anyone at all, just feel free. What comes to mind when you see this picture? Do I have any hand up yet? Any virtual? Stress, okay. Another person, what comes to mind when you see this? Okay, I'm seeing a message in the chats. Okay, done with it, over it, raise hands, which is equal to the end, okay. Any other from anyone? I think whatever we are thinking about when we see this picture is correct. I'm seeing unhappiness, I'm seeing confusion. Yes, this is what is associated sometimes with conflict. And that is why we want to delve into this topic today. So for my presentation, I would basically be taking us through what conflict is, why it arises in the first place. And with that, the importance of we being able to manage conflicts well. And as we are aware, we are narrowing it down to the workplace. And then we'll see how best we can have some strategies for conflict management. And then we'll conclude on our session. So by the time we are done with this, at least you should be able to know what conflict is, why it even comes in the first place, the importance of we managing conflicts well, and then strategies for conflict management. So what is conflict? I'm showing us something right now, and I don't know how many of us growing up, or probably even when we became adults, have played the game Spot the Difference. Maybe someone has. You can probably type it in the chat, or you can just use your virtual hand icon to let me know that you have played that game before. But when we talk about conflicts, as we can see nicely prepared meal on the plate there, it is something that we simply cannot do without. It is something that is very natural. When it comes to the workplace, by all means, we will be encountering conflicts from one point to the other. And what is it? It is just a matter of we having differences. It could be differences in goals. It could be differences in values. It could be differences in even interests. How you see things, how I see things can bring about conflict once there is no agreement. So like we can see this on our screen, almost everything we are seeing there looks alike, but if you carefully look at it, where we have the red circles, there are differences. And that is what arises and causes conflict when there are differences. If I'm seeing something to be red and you tell me it is blue, and I just don't understand why you are saying it is otherwise from what I think, conflict can arise. So in the workplace, when we have different values, we have different goals, different interests, that can cause conflict. And like I said, it is a very natural thing. So just for the mere fact that there are differences in the different areas I've mentioned, values, goals, interests, that is conflict. So for the workplace, what are the types of conflicts that we can look at? There are many types of conflict in the workplace. I started telling you a story and I'm going to continue pretty soon. The first type is the interpersonal conflict. And this is when people have issues with others, and this is usually personal reasons. I gave you the scenario where some time back, my boss wanted us to purchase PCs for our staff. And with this particular time, all the staff he wanted us to replace their computers for were using desktops. But out of the blue, my boss said, we should buy them laptops. And guess what? Being an application support specialist then, and with all the support I was giving our end users, which were our staff, I knew how they handled even their desktops. So thinking about them having access to laptops, I wasn't very sure it was a good idea. And that is when we had a clash. And this was my boss and I. I had to let him know my reasons for not wanting us to get laptops for our users. And he also had to let me know why he thought we had to get the laptops for them. This is an example of conflict that can happen in the workplace when it comes to interpersonal conflict. Because he had a particular perception, I had a different perception altogether. And this was purely personal because of how I felt people went ahead with the use of devices we gave them. So for me, handing over laptops to them meant more work to do. Someone may come and say, I can't find my laptop charger. Someone may come and say the screen is spoiled. I mean, so many things. And I don't think I was ready for that. Neither did I think as a business, we were ready to handle all that. And that is why I had my reservations. But on the other hand, my boss saw things differently. And I'll tell you more details on that. The next type of workplace conflict that we can have is conflict related to tasks. Now, I'm zooming in on specific conflicts related to our workplace, or that can happen in our workplace. And when it comes to tasks, there are times that depending on work that is being done, you can give different tasks to people, and that can even depend on your position. So if you so happen to be a manager, maybe you go ahead and give different tasks to the people you work with. Or it could be that you are working collaboratively with other people in your organization. And when it comes to tasks and conflicts with that, it is a matter of there being disagreement of what is supposed to be done in terms of a task. So something happened just quite recently at my workplace. We had a meeting and we were going through a project that we are working on. And from this project we were working on, we were expecting to have finished certain tasks that we had on our board. We use a software called Jira. Probably some of us are aware of it. And looking at the tasks that we had listed out there, there was a particular one we were expecting to have been done, but it wasn't done at the end of the period when we were checking the work that has been done. So by this, we just checked to see who was responsible for this task. We only got to realize later that there was conflict between the two individuals who were supposed to have worked on the task. One was supposed to be doing the back-end work, another doing the front-end work, which will be integrated for that task to have been completed. But because there was conflict on who is to do what, even though it was indicated there for one of them, the other wasn't very sure. And because of that, we didn't get the work done. That is an example of conflicts related to tasks in the workplace. Another one could also be that someone may probably have an issue with executing a particular task that you have given to them. Probably they think they are rather too big, or they think they are more senior in a way, they don't see why you should give them a particular task to do. That can cause conflict in the workplace. So we have seen interpersonal conflicts and also conflict related to tasks. The third I want us to look at is conflict related to processes. Yes. For me as a person, one of the things that I felt was a weakness was how I liked to do my things. And so if I'm working with any person, I felt they had to do it my way. I don't know whether you relate. If you also feel people should do things your way. But this can cause conflict in the workplace. As we can see, the conflicts related to processes, we have start, we have end. There are three different ways sometimes we can get a particular thing done. So the fact that Amma is using process A and you are not so okay with it does not mean that it won't get us to the end. And that is what sometimes people fail to see, and by so doing, cause conflict in the workplace. When it comes to this, we have to know that sometimes we are not the only people who are right, or people do not necessarily have to do it our way. There could be different processes of doing things. But when people see things differently, when it comes to how a task is supposed to be executed or how something is supposed to be done in the workplace, that can bring about conflict. So we have looked at three types of workplace conflicts: interpersonal conflicts, conflicts related to tasks, and the last one being conflicts related to processes. Now we can see something here. These two men are trying to pull the rope towards their end, and it's going towards the opposite. We used to call this tug of war. I don't know when exactly it became tug of peace, but as we can see, everyone feels it has to go towards them. And we want to look at why conflict arises. It is usually because there are differences in personalities. I have given myself as an example, and that is because of my personality, how I want certain things to be done. Some people may be detailed oriented, and I have one boss like that. He is that detailed oriented. In fact, he is the kind of person that you would know that you have prepared your presentation or you have prepared your document, you have read through, you have edited, you have done everything. But by the time it gets to him, I mean, just by him seeing it, you just find one tiny thing you probably didn't notice. That is how detailed, oriented, and meticulous he is. And that is his personality. Not everyone can be like him. And there may be some other people who may not necessarily care about going into too much details. For them, anything goes. Now, can you just imagine these two personalities working on a thing or working in the same department or company? I tell you, it may bring about a lot of conflict. Because for the person who doesn't really care what happens, as in anything goes, they don't see why you should pinpoint that N that has probably been italicized instead of being straight. They just see it as, this is a document. Once you can read, let us just move on. But for the other individual who is meticulous, they would have an issue with it. And that is where we can have conflict arising, when there is difference in personalities. Another way that we can have conflicts arising is also difference in work styles. Everyone has their style of working. I am the type of person that all I have to know is this is the task to work on, and voila, I just get to it and work on it. If I need any help, I may come back to you. I may search wherever I know I can get the information from. But for other people, they feel working in a team is something they like to do. And if it so happens that these two separate work styles of the individuals I've described to you right now are working in the same department or working on the same project, this is likely to cause conflict to arise. Because if I am the person that all I want is you are doing A, B, C, D, and then I just get into my corner, get it done. And then my other partner, Amma, is someone who wants to sit down with me. So how are we doing this? Can we do that? This is something that is definitely going to conflict with my type of work style. And this sometimes causes conflict in the workplace. So we have looked at the different types of conflicts in the workplace. We have also looked at why it even arises in the first place. Now, my question to us is, why do we even need conflict management? Because with everything that I have said, when there are differences between different people, it means by all means at a point, they are going to clash. We may not be meeting eye to eye simply because my way of doing things is different from how you feel things have to be done. And your way of doing things is also obviously different from how I see things to be done. And an example is what I gave with my boss and how we just could not understand each other at the time of we purchasing our new devices. So let me get onto it. Why do we even need conflict management in the first place? And with this, I'm going to look at the reverse. We need conflict management. Why? Because it improves productivity. I mentioned I'm looking at it in the reverse. And this is why. When there is conflict, there is little collaboration. Look at what happened between my boss and I. I mean, I had a difference in whatever idea he was sharing with me, and so did he. Because of that, we had to spend time understanding each other and coming to a conclusion on what to do. And when we have conflict, and it so happens, like the example I gave earlier on, that we had an issue simply because the back-end engineer and the front-end engineer were not so sure who was to do what on the project we were working on. So by the time we were done and expecting to have seen results, we did not see the results simply because of the conflict that arose during their discussion. So in order to improve productivity in our workplace, conflict management is something that we must pay close attention to. So if you're wondering, How do you do this? I've got you covered with the strategies for conflict management. So what are some of the strategies for conflict management? With everything that we have said so far, we can tell for sure that conflict is not something we want to be encouraging in our workplaces. We know it is natural, they are bound to happen, but when they do happen, how best can we manage them and resolve them quickly? The first to look at is active listening. Yes, active listening. You have to make that effort. And I like that it is active listening. There are times that we claim we are listening to people, but guess what? Our mind is on something else. Yes. Probably we are even looking at our phones. This one, even though we are looking at the workplace, it even goes beyond that in our day-to-day lives and activities. When it comes to listening, this is a skill and an art that we all have to learn and develop. I had an issue, a situation with my boss. Now, when it comes to actively listening to the person, you tend to understand where they are coming from, their point of view, and why they are even making that particular statement or reasoning, why they are coming up with it. If we pay deaf ear to certain things that are said, then the only thing we'll do is to foster the conflict that has already arisen. So one strategy for us to manage conflict well is for us to pay close attention to make sure we understand each other. Like the tasks example I gave, it was a matter of the back-end engineer and the front-end engineer understanding each other, that this is what I'm supposed to do. Okay, based on that, I believe this is what you can help me with. And with them actively listening to each other, they could have gone ahead to produce the results that we were all waiting for. Another strategy that we can use in conflict management is mediation. This is when a situation has come up. You have probably done your very best to talk to whoever you had a conflict with, but for a reason you realize things are just not happening the way you want to. It could be about a task, it could be about interpersonal things coming up, causing conflicts. But you just realize that with every effort you have made for you to understand each other, it is not happening. It would be good to get a neutral person to listen to the both of you and then help with whatever solution that will come up. Sometimes it could be someone who is in a senior role, because there are times that probably between colleagues, conflicts can arise and it's difficult to solve amicably. When it happens like that, it would just be good to get maybe another colleague who is a neutral person, listen to the both of you, your sides, and see what best helps solve whatever problem has come up. Or you could get a senior person, as I indicated earlier on, for that person to just be a mediator between the two of you and let you know the best way to go about solving whatever difference that you are having at the time. The last strategy for conflict management is compromising. This is a word that not a lot of people like to hear. Why? Because they feel it is me saying no to whatever I think should be right. And as we can see in the image, it is your say, it is my say, but then we decide to meet somewhere in the middle. To meet somewhere in the middle. And this is what happened between my boss and I. So at the end of the period, he made me understand something. He just said to me, and this was back then in 2019, somewhere around August, when we had to purchase the new devices for our users. he told me something back then. He just mentioned that it is easier to work with when you're using a laptop than a desktop. And we may just never know. Sometimes people would have to walk into meetings and may need to take some notes. If they have laptops with them, it is something that can be of much more help than using desktops. I, at the time, had to do the active listening of understanding what he was talking about. So by the time we were done, what he said and what I said, we had to meet somewhere in the middle. And what was our agreement? I told him when it comes to the receptionist, for instance, or those we had there who were client-facing, it was not going to be so safe for them to be using laptops. And he understood my point of view, as I also came to understand him when he gave me his reasons. And at the end of the day, what we decided to do was to buy for those who were not client-facing, and for those who were client-facing, we gave them the desktops. And this, in fact, as I mentioned earlier, happened in 2019. Guess what? In 2020, when COVID hit, I had to go back to my boss and tell him, this decision you made us take some months back has really helped us, because staff had to be working from home. We had managed to get most of our applications on the cloud. And if they didn't have laptops at the time COVID hit the world, it meant we had to purchase laptops for them. For the client-facing staff, most of the time they had to be in the office, so it wasn't an issue. So it became a win-win situation in that we listened to each other, understood each other, and that conflict that came, we were able to manage it well. This is why there is a need for us to manage conflicts in our workplace. We do not have to close our eyes to them when they happen. For some people, when conflict arises, they prefer just to ignore, not to talk about it at all. But how long will we keep ignoring? It is best we have conversations and clear differences and be able to meet halfway with each other where necessary. If it so happens that we need to even get people to come in as mediators, why not? Everything we have to do in order to have our productivity improved, we must do it, because in the presence of conflict, there is no way we'll be able to achieve what we want together as a team. In the presence of conflict, there will be no collaboration. In the presence of conflict, in fact, the results we seek to achieve, there is no way we can achieve them. And that is why we have to check to manage conflicts and resolve them as and when they do occur in our workplace. In conclusion, effective conflict management is crucial for creating a positive and a productive work environment. By understanding the different types of conflict that are present, we looked at the interpersonal, we looked at the task-related conflicts, and we also looked at the process-related conflicts, which can occur in the workplace. With we understanding this and the common causes behind them, just because of personal differences or personality differences that can be in place in terms of work styles, in terms of how we see things, how detailed oriented someone may be, or otherwise, we are better equipped when we understand them. And it also helps us to address the issues that come with them. It is important for us to remember that conflict is not inherently negative and can even lead to growth. Yes, because for me as an individual, I had to learn to actively listen to people. And this is what I gained through the different conflicts I had. Because from time to time, I'll sit down and reflect. Why are we even clashing on this in the first place? Could it be that I'm not hearing what they are saying? Could it be that they are not hearing what I'm saying? It's made me become a better communicator. And it's also helped me to become a better listener. So it is not entirely bad. It is a natural thing that would occur. But when it comes, we have to resolve it, learn from it, and move. So to manage conflict effectively, it is important to utilize the strategies that I've shared. That is active listening, we being able to compromise where necessary, and having someone to mediate between us if any issue arises and we are unable to resolve them. These strategies require a willingness to communicate openly. Yes, we have to be transparent about some of the things that will come up. There are times that you may get feedback that may hurt your feelings, but it is important that we learn from the mistakes we may have made and then grow out of it. We can create a culture of implementing the strategies that I have mentioned in our workplaces, and this will foster better collaboration amongst colleagues, and it will also increase our productivity. And overall, it is going to be preventing toxic environments, which you and I believe, do not want to be a part of. And with that, once we are collaborating well, and everyone, if there are issues arising, it is easily resolved, we manage them well, is going to bring an environment that people would enjoy working in. And that is why we need to be managing conflicts well and better in our workplace. Thank you so much. At this point, I'm going to ask for questions. You can put it in the chat, or you can go ahead and use the virtual hand raising to ask your question. Okay, I see a hand up. Constance?
Yes, I mean, everything that you say, I don't know if it's a question or an observation, maybe both. But what I'm trying to say is, I saw the three main reasons. I mean, you explained well the three main reasons why conflicts arise. But to me, there is still a good intention, even if I have my style, you have your style, you have good intention, because I just left, I would say, a toxic environment. There were ill-intended, no matter which route you take, you accept to use their way because you don't want to have headache, at the end of the day, everything that I was doing, let me put it this way, they were cliquish. And it's like they didn't care about the performance, the result. They care about their way, flexing the muscle, putting you down to show that, yes, they are in charge, they are the boss. So what I'm trying to say is the three things that you mentioned, there are still good intention to get the job done, but the toxic environment that I just left, there was none of that. They wanted to be the boss. They wanted to prove that they are better, they are more intelligent. I don't know. That's what I wanted to say. I don't know if that makes sense.
Sure. I really understand you. I mean, nobody wants to work in a toxic environment. And as you have indicated, if we are able to better manage conflict, then yes, we would have an environment where workers can feel free to work. But where is the opposite and conflict is rather something that is thriving, then nobody would like to work in such an environment. So I really do understand where you're coming from. There are times that you may have people who just want their way. And when it so happens like that, if you going by their way, you are okay with it, then maybe, yes, you continue with that. But when you realize it's becoming too toxic for you, you are not able to grow, you are not seeing any better version of yourself, then if it is time to move on, why not?
Oh, but that's what I did. And I was, you know what? I thank them, to be honest with you, because when I left, I didn't have another job. You know, some people felt that I was crazy, but it was too much for me. And I was like, okay, maybe they feel that I'm so needy, you know, that's why. So I gave my resignation and it was for the best. I mean, so far, so good. That's all I can say. But what I'm trying to say is what baffled me is they may not like my style. They may want to have their style, but not only they created a toxic environment, but to me, they promoted mediocrity. Because when you're part of the clique, you mess up, they overlook. When you're not part of the clique, the same thing that you do you know, it's even less serious than, you know, what one of the clique member did. They made a big deal out of it. But the same thing one of the clique will do, they overlook that. It's okay. And because they pass favoritism on each other, so it becomes normal to underperform. That's how I felt. It was okay to underperform as long as you're part of the clique. And that was hard for me to handle that also. So yes, I left. It was my time. Thanks. I left for the best. That's all I want to say.
Sure, it's very, very understandable. I see something in the chat. Would you agree that regardless, the only sure way to address conflicts is compromise, given that individual differences are impossible to reconcile? I think I'll agree with you on that, Sam. Yes, there are times that we'll have to compromise. And I think from the example Constance is even given, she probably had been compromising for so long a time. At a point, it was something that she could not take, especially because of how the environment was becoming for her. But you do have a point when you say that at the end of the day, there should be some kind of compromise coming in there. For someone who is very meticulous and someone who does not necessarily care about certain things, we'll have to meet each other halfway. If the one who doesn't really care would put in some extra work, why not? So that we don't really conflict so much. I agree with you on that. Any other question, contribution? You can put it in the chat or you can raise your hand using the virtual hand raise icon. All right, the silence is golden. I believe that we have all learned a thing or two. At the end of the day, you should just know that wherever we are working, our sanity, our peace is more important. So even though we know that conflicts may arise and it's something that is natural, we need to check to resolve them. But where it so happens that it's difficult to manage, then I think it would just be good for us to advise ourselves on the next steps to take in order not to lose our peace. Thank you so much. I'll hand over back to you, Na.
Thank you, Perpetual, for the insightful and relatable presentation. My key takeaway is that conflict is not always bad and can be mediation and compromise. Thank you, everyone, for your time on the call. In 2 weeks, we have another session, which is Power BI Labs, similar to the Python Labs we had a few weeks back. We hope to see you there. Have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.